Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel. It's Manu. I know it's been a while since I've recorded a video and I will try my best to be as consistent as I can. Today's video is going to be about how to find a good therapist, and I'll also be doing a Wingstop mukbang. So excited. I will be trying every single flavor at Wingstop except for their plain. This video was sponsored, aka thanks to my best friends Keen and Lema for sending me Venmo so that I can pay for the DoorDash, because that was not cheap, so thank you for doing that. Before I get started on the eating, if you're watching this video, then you're probably considering therapy and you want to know how to find a therapist, a good therapist, because there's a difference. I want to say congrats on taking that step. That takes courage, honestly, to be able to be honest with yourself about, hey, maybe I need therapy, I need to deal with something. It's easy to, kind of like neglect our mental health, especially in our current society. There's always that stigma of like, what do you need therapy for? But if you're considering therapy, it's a very brave and bold step. So kudos to you. And, you don't need to have a mental illness or be diagnosed with anything to pursue therapy. Whatever reason you're thinking of going to therapy, it's valid. Whether it's you're stuck with something at work, you're stuck with something at school, or a relationship, or a codependency, or you just want to talk to someone who's unbiased, all of it's valid. And sometimes you don't realize why you're in therapy until you start therapy. So everyone's experience is different and it's all valid. And I also want to say that therapy isn't for everyone, but obviously you won't find out until you try it. But it is one step towards your healing, and for a lot of people it can kind of start what they need to start that healing process. Also, therapy isn't always accessible or affordable, which is, it really sucks that, especially in the United States, mental health treatment and services aren't the best and they're not prioritized. And so it is an investment. It's, even if you have insurance, there's like always a copay. And so it's kind of, sometimes you have to sacrifice, financially in order to access therapy, which is not how it should be, but that's unfortunately how it is now. I'll try to give some advice on finding affordable therapy services. And I have my laptop with all of my notes on it because I'm a Virgo. I always need notes because I don't want to forget anything. So I'll be looking kind of back and forth, eating and looking at my notes. Of course, my printer broke, because why would it work when I need it the most? Such is life. But let me just make sure that I kind of said everything I wanted to in my intro. So a therapist, and this is something that when I first wanted to go to therapy, I thought they were gonna like fix me, they were gonna fix all my problems. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. A therapist is there as a guide. They're there to show you kind of like how to heal yourself, but you have to do the hard internal work. It's very challenging, it's difficult, but it's so worth it. So, remember that they're not going to tell you what to do. They're not going to fix your problems, but they're going to kind of guide you so that you can fix your own problems, which at first it was frustrating for me when I first started therapy. Okay, so before I start the next part, I think I'm going to start eating because I'm freaking hungry. Look at this though. Doesn't it look good? So I have every flavor. There's 11 flavors. I didn't get the plain one because it's plain. I got the fries, just the regular seasoned fries. I did get the voodoo fries, but I may or may not have eaten them while I was getting ready. So sorry about that. I also got the corn, and then I got their ranch cheese, honey mustard, and blue cheese. So I'll be trying all of those. Before I start, I want to say that the only flavors that I get that I've tried that I just love, I usually get mango habanero and original hot. Those are my favorite flavors. So I'm going to try the rest for the first time. Let me know what are your favorite flavors, and let's see what the most popular ones are. I wrote down what all of the flavors are, and then I'll just kind of rate them. So the first one is Hawaiian. So it looks like. And I'm just gonna dip it in ranch because Wingstop's ranch is so good to me. I don't know. It's like sweet. It kind of tastes like the mild version of the mango habanero, actually. I would give that a 7 out of 10. The next one is Original Hot. This is one of my favorites. Let me try it with the blue cheese. Usually just get ranch, but wow. This might get messy. I have paper towels. Original Hot is a favorite for me, so that's like a 9. I also have Coke. I rarely drink soda because it makes me burp. So if I burp in my video, I'm still cute. Okay. So before we kind of decide to like how to find a therapist, it's important to kind of sit down and ask yourself why you want to go to therapy. Again, you know, whatever reason it is, it's valid, but you should still know it. So when I first wanted to go to therapy, it was because I had really bad test anxiety in school when I was in college, and I would just get so anxious to even take an exam that it would just kind of consume me, and I was just so anxiety ridden that I was like, okay, I need to pursue therapy. I need to get help for this. That was my original reason to pursue therapy. But you know, whatever your reason is, just make sure that you're aware of it. And then also ask yourself, what are your goals for therapy? Like, why do you want to go to therapy? But also, what are you trying to get out of it? You know, like what would success look like to you, basically? And then for me, at the time, you know, I need to be able to take these exams and graduate. That's what success would look like for me. So I was hoping that therapy would help me kind of get to that point. So once you write that down, it's kind of good to have like a list of therapists. And the way to compile this list, basically, first is to kind of start by asking any of your family members or friends or colleagues if they have any recommendations of therapists that they see. And I know that there's, you know, the stigma with therapy. A lot of people don't openly talk about it, which is really sad, but it's unfortunately true. So maybe you can't go to family, or maybe you can't go to friends or colleagues, and that's totally fine. But if that is an option, then, you know, I would definitely trust those folks and their referrals, because if they like their therapist, then, you know, that might be a good place to start. But also, some people don't really want to share who their therapist is, or kind of know that their friend's going to the same therapist. Sometimes that can be a little weird. So whatever folks feel good about, it doesn't hurt to ask, basically. And then also, if you're in school, if you're at work, sometimes they provide therapists. I know that when I went to Davis in my undergrad, they had a counseling and psychological services center where they had like 15 therapists, basically, and you kind of just filled out a questionnaire, and then they would pair you up with someone. And that was part of tuition. We pay so much in college, so you might as well make the most of it and use those services. And then also, some workplaces also provide therapy, or they'll pay for like your first 20 sessions. So it's good to kind of be aware of any of that, especially because therapy is so expensive and you want to be able to save as much money as you can. And then there are some LGBTQ centers, there's some mental health centers that provide, especially if it's like part of the county or part of the government, they'll provide discounted therapists, or they'll provide like a sliding scale. So it's good to kind of look up those centers. One that I'm thinking about, because, you know, I was at Davis in Sacramento, is the Gender Health Center in Sacramento. They provide therapy for folks who don't have insurance. Usually they ask for donations of like whatever you can pay, but they never turn anyone back down. And they have therapists. Those therapists are interns, so they're supervised under a licensed clinical psychologist. But, you know, they all have good training, and they're all aware of like LGBTQ issues and gender and things like that. So, you know, if there's a center that focuses on something that you really would like to get therapy on, then it's a great way to kind of look those up on Google and then contact them and see if they have a sliding scale or donation-based therapy. The downside is that usually those places have a long waiting list, which isn't ideal, but, you know, the faster that you get on those, hopefully you can hear back soon. And then, you know, as I said, it's not always financially accessible. Sometimes you have to create a financial plan. You have to save up for therapy, or I know some folks do a GoFundMe, and, you know, it really shouldn't be this way, but unfortunately it is. And, you know, I hope that y'all are able to financially afford therapy. Again, it is an investment, but I think that, you know, just it's your health and it's important. Mental health is just as important as your physical health. And, you know, if your leg was hurting or if something was wrong with your body, you would see a doctor. And so, you know, it's the same thing with therapy. And so that kind of goes also into insurance. Not everyone can afford insurance, of course. If you don't have insurance, then I would recommend, you know, hopefully you qualify for Medi-Cal or Medicaid. Usually those services are for folks who, you know, either don't make enough income, and even though they're not the best services, it's better than nothing. And, you know, the county does have therapists as well. And so sometimes we kind of have to make the most of what we have access to, and it's difficult. You know, I had Medi-Cal for a little bit because I was unemployed and trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And I was paired up with a therapist, and, you know, going from like undergrad where I had a pretty good therapist, and then being unemployed for a little bit and having, you know, a therapist through the county, there was definitely a difference, you know. And that kind of goes into how, you know, folks from low income backgrounds tend to kind of get neglected, or their services aren't as good. And that's like a bigger issue, but basically it's better than nothing. And for me, it was still helpful. So I would recommend that as well. But based on your insurance, you know, if you have insurance from your job, or if you have insurance from school, get a list of your in-network providers, basically who your insurance covers as therapists. Usually they'll give you a long list of people. You can call them or you can email them, and they'll just send you a list of people that they know for sure will be covered. And that's a really good place to start, because once you get that list, you can take that list and like look at all the names, and you can actually Google the therapist. And a website that's really good for that is called psychologytoday.com. It's like the yellow pages. It's like a directory of therapists, and most therapists are on it. If they're not, you can always Google search those therapists, but they're pretty much all on there. And you can search that directory based on what kind of issues you want them to focus on, based on what kind of therapy type. Like if you're aware of the different types of therapies and you know which one you want, you can search based on that. You can search based on if they focus on gender, LGBTQ, if they focus on, you know, substance use or trauma, or, you know, anxiety, depression, all those things. You can also basically you can look it based on if you want like a specific gender for a therapist. If you want a non-binary person, they even have that option, which is really great. And so psychologytoday.com is like my go-to. If I want to search someone up, I look them up on that, and then it'll just give me a list of like what their specialties are. They'll usually have like an intro of how they work, and they usually have their website linked on that as well. So if you want more information about them, you can go on their website, and then it'll usually go into the ways that they approach therapy, basically, which is good to know, you know. So once you get that list, you can schedule a phone consultation with the therapist on your list who basically passed that first check of like psychologytoday.com, where it's like, okay, so this is someone that could be a good therapist for me, so now let me call them. And I'm gonna stop at that real quick and try the next one, which is Cajun. That's what it looks like. Kind of looks like the original hot, actually, but I'm gonna use the ranch. Okay. It's really peppery. Yeah, it's really peppery, so I would give that a 6. I don't know. I mean, black pepper is okay. It's not my favorite spice. And then this one is lemon pepper. Okay, so I know this is a favorite. I remember trying it years ago, and I didn't really like it. I'm gonna put it in the ranch. Yeah, I don't know, y'all. It's just lemony. It tastes like a lemon to me. I'd give it a 6. And this is the garlic parmesan. And I'll use blue cheese for this because someone recommended that. I like the garlic. I would give that one, I'd give it an 8. It's still kind of dry for me. I like the wings that have like a lot of sauce on them. Like this one. Oh my god. This is hickory smoked barbecue. Can't believe I've never tried the barbecue one, but I'm gonna use it ranch. Okay, ready? It tastes like barbecue. Like, I don't know. Barbecue flavored wings are kind of basic, I feel like. I would give that, I'd give it a 5. You know, I don't think I'd ever order barbecue flavored chicken wings. I feel like it's whatever. God, I'm so annoying. Okay. Let's see. So now you're going to do the phone consultation. This can be really scary for folks. I know that sometimes it's hard talking to a stranger on the phone, let alone a stranger that you're going to talk to about your issues. And, you know, this is potentially a person that you might form a therapeutic relationship with. It's intimidating and it can be scary, but I promise you it's worth it. And, you know, if you need a friend by your side, or, you know, you need someone to kind of like help you, go for it. Ask someone to be your accountability buddy. I'm eating a carrot because it's important to get your veggies in. That's enough. But finding a therapist is kind of like dating, minus like the romance and sex. Do not pick a therapist that you're attracted to. That's the worst thing you can do, because that's inappropriate and it will distract you from you know, getting what you need out of the therapy. You shouldn't really have a crush on your therapist or have any kind of inappropriate weird thing like that. But it is like dating in terms of you're really trying to find who you connect with, who you can feel, you know, safe and good with. And in order to figure that out, you have to ask all these questions and you have to kind of get to know them to see if it's something worth committing to. And so, you know, I mean, I'm not the best with dating, but when it comes to therapists, it really is like that. And the first one might not work out, the second one might not work out, but there's a therapist out there, you know, for you. Just like there's supposed to be someone romantic for you, supposedly. I don't know. I'm not bitter or anything, but whatever. So when you make your phone consultation, your therapist will have a lot of questions for you, and it'll probably overlap with the things that you want to say and ask. But I just want to remind you that you are allowed to ask them questions. You're allowed to tell them things that are important to you, just as they'll tell you and ask you. And it should go both ways. When I first was looking for a therapist, I had no clue like what I was doing. I just was like, okay, this therapist sounds good, whatever, I'll go. Luckily for me, you know, eventually it worked out and I found a good therapist. But I wish I had known that I can ask them questions to figure out if they're a good fit for me. You know, I didn't really know I could do that. I thought they were just gonna kind of take care of it, but it goes both ways. So have a list of questions to ask, and I made a list of my own questions that I plan to ask. So I was in therapy for 6 years. I've had a 2-year gap, and I'm actually wanting to start again now. And so I'm going through this process right now. So I came up with a list of questions that I plan to ask during the phone consultation. But you can start out by letting them know that, you know, you're looking for a good fit for a therapist. And so you're contacting multiple therapists who seem to kind of align with what you're looking for. And, you know, you'll let them know based on the consultation and based on your choices who you decide to go with. And that kind of makes it easier for them to know that, like, you know, they might not hear back from you depending on if they're the ones that you pick or not. Because I know it can be scary to like reject someone or like, you know, have a phone consultation and then you realize they're not the one, but then they call you asking if you want to schedule an appointment. It's hard to reject folks, but it's part of practicing, you know, saying no and practicing sticking up for your boundaries pretty much. So some questions to ask based on, you know, what's important to you. Ask them, do you have a sliding scale? Do you take insurance? What are your prices? In terms of insurance, usually your provider will tell you what your copay is. It's usually the same with every therapist, but it's good to know and good to ask your therapist as well, your potential therapist. You can ask them if they assign homework outside of therapy. There are certain types of therapy such as DBT, CBT, and ACT, and I can make a different video going over the different types of therapies. But some therapies, you do have homework that you work on. You get worksheets, journaling, whatever it is. And so you can ask whether or not you want that or not. You can ask if the therapist does that. You can also ask, you know, if social justice is important to you. You can ask your therapist, you know, is social justice important to you? What are you doing to work on your own internalized biases? You know, and what are you doing in terms of anti-racism? You can ask them, how do they work on their own internalized, you know, biases and discrimination. These are things that are okay to ask, especially if your therapist holds privilege. You know, there's that power dynamic in terms of like, if you're not white and they're white, you know, like, do they acknowledge their privilege? Do they understand how white supremacy works? These are questions that, although they might be uncomfortable to ask, they're important to ask. And it's a lot, like, there's this kind of weird stigma, I feel like, of like, you know, we shouldn't ask, you know, people their politics, but this is a therapist that you're gonna pretty much, you know, tell very vulnerable things to. And if it's important to know where they're at in terms of their politics and their own work, because especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're a Black person or Indigenous person, you know, a therapist can do more harm than good if they're not aware of how racism works, if they're not aware of how anti-Blackness works. So it's good to get these uncomfortable questions out of the way before you commit to this person. And if they get uncomfortable with these questions, then that already is a red flag that they may not be the good fit for you, you know? I think that not every therapist is willing to do that work, and it's unfortunate, and a lot of them don't even get that training in the programs that they're in to get licensed. And you know, so they really have to do that work outside of whatever one class that they got on like diversity. And you know, I wish that it was more required. Unfortunately it's not, but that's how it is. I'm gonna try the fries with the cheese. I've never tried their cheese, like just as its own dip. And it tastes like nacho cheese. I'm really weird, and I like my fries soggy. Probably gonna get so much hate for saying that. I'm gonna try the honey mustard. I don't really like, honey mustard's good. I don't really like crunchy fries. I like them soggy because they seem to have more flavor for me. I don't know. Whatever. Hate me if you want to. I don't care. Other questions, you know, ask them, how do you feel about police brutality? You know, ask them, what are your politics around fat phobia and diet culture? You know, if your therapist is fat phobic and, you know, weight stuff is an issue for you, like, you wouldn't want to see someone who's perpetuating fat phobia and perpetuating the same cycles of harm that are the reason you're seeking therapy. And so it's okay to ask them these things if these things are important to you. You can also ask, you know, do you have experience working with someone with whatever identity it is? So for me, I would ask something like, do you have experience working with Punjabi or Desi Indian people? Do you have experience working with queer people? Do you have experience working with non-binary people? Those are questions that I would ask, because if they don't have any experience with it, then that's something that I need to kind of take into consideration when I'm picking a therapist. You know, they can specialize in it, but if they don't really have any experience working with those folks, I'm not trying to spend any of my time that I'm paying them to educate them. You know, that's not your job. If you end up spending any amount of time in therapy educating your therapist on an issue, that's not cool. You know, that's their job to do. They are the ones who signed up to be your therapist, and as their client, it's their responsibility to educate themselves about issues that affect their clients. So it's okay to ask those things. And then you can also ask, like, how do you track your clients' progress in treatment? Like, what do you use to deem if, you know, your client is reaching their goals and is successful in terms of treatment outcomes? It's okay to ask that, because some therapists track it differently. And if you both are on the same page on that, it's easy to kind of remember, you know, the progress that you're making. Because sometimes when you're in therapy, especially if you're dealing with depression, it's easy to think that you're not making any progress, or that you're just stuck or wasting time. If there are, you know, measured outcomes, there are like variables that you can actually see changes in, it's a lot easier to remember that you are making progress, even if it's small. I'm gonna try the corn. This is their Cajun corn. I've never tried it, but I'm not gonna dip it in anything. Oh wow, that's hecka good. What the heck? Ten out of 10. Let me just make sure. This is mild. This is the mild flavor. I'm gonna dip it in ranch. Assuming it's just gonna be mild. Yeah. Nothing special. So once you end the phone consultation, you know, I mean, I've done like 3 or 4 maybe in my life. So it really depends on how many you want to do. Depends on what the pool looks like of your choices. You might really like the first therapist that you call, and that's great. Or it might take you like 10 calls, and you know, there's no one way to do it. But once you find someone that you want to schedule a session with, it may take a couple of sessions for you to even like figure out if this is the right therapist. Usually the first few sessions are them trying to get to know you, trying to get to know your history. They'll ask you a lot of questions about your family, your childhood, you know, your present life. And so it's really hard to, you're not really doing the work yet. So it's hard to tell if this is a good match or not. So give it, you know, give it some sessions before you decide. But basically, your therapist should be someone who you feel is non-judgmental, someone who you feel is objective and isn't, you know, they shouldn't be telling you what to do. It's more you're working as a team, and so it's both of you against whatever issue or problem you're facing. And you know, they should be someone that you should be able to feel safe and vulnerable with. If you don't feel like you can be honest with them or you can trust them, then that's not a good sign. That might mean that you might need to see someone else. But also, if you struggle with being vulnerable and talking about your feelings in general, then no therapist might feel safe for you. And that's something to kind of bring up, you know, say, I'm struggling to trust you even though I want to, but this is something that I struggle with in general. And your therapist should be able to work with you on that. A part of having a therapist is also learning how to have a healthy, good relationship with someone. The therapeutic relationship is meant to teach you how to trust someone, how to be vulnerable, how to be healthy. And so part of that work is kind of getting yourself to trust that person. And so ask yourself, do I trust this person because, do I not trust this person because they suck and they're just not trustworthy? Or do I not trust them because I'm struggling with something internally? And then that usually will let you know if it's a therapist thing or if it's an issue that you should bring up with your therapist. You know, it's okay to have your guard up, especially in the beginning. It takes time to trust someone, but don't, you know, try not to be so closed off that you're not even able to be vulnerable with your therapist. You know, they're meant to be there to help you, but they can only help you as long as you're honest and open to it. That's why you can't ever make anyone go to therapy. It has to be a decision that comes from them, unfortunately. Some red flags with therapists. Okay, before I go into that, I'm gonna try the Atomic. Oh my god, so this one's supposed to be spicy, and I can handle my spice. Okay, I'm Punjabi, but it has like, oh my god, it has like flakes on it and stuff. I don't know. Maybe I should have saved this for last or whatever. Okay, Atomic, here we go. Oh, spicy. It's like a kick. I'll give that an 8. It's good. The next one's mango habanero. This is my favorite. I always get original hot mango habanero. So this is gonna be a 9 for me, but let me try it. Okay, so red flags. The person you see your therapist, they should not be on their phone. They should not be texting. They should not be on their computer. I mean, they'll take notes and they'll let you know, like, hey, I'm typing my notes. But they shouldn't be surfing the web or talking to someone. That's inappropriate. They shouldn't be, like, looking at the clock or being distracted. They should have all their undivided attention on you. You know, I mean, once in a while, therapists are humans. They might be going through something and they might need to, like, pause or, you know, whatever, emergency. But if this is something that keeps happening, that's really inappropriate and that's a red flag. And you should, if you're able to, bring it up to them, but also it's not your responsibility. So that's a red flag. They shouldn't be telling you about their personal life, and they shouldn't be telling you, you know, what's going on in their life. This is about you, and you're paying them, and, you know, it's actually kind of inappropriate for them to be sharing really anything about their life. I already said you shouldn't be picking a therapist that you're attracted to. That's just a recipe for disaster. And also, you shouldn't really be hanging out with your therapists outside of the therapy. They're not really supposed to be, you know, your friend. They're pretty much, it's like kind of like having a doctor or like a dentist. It's, you know, it should be a professional relationship. That's therapeutic. And then another thing is, even, you know, even if someone is part of an identity that, you know, you share, even if they're Desi, even if they're Indian, even if they're LGBTQ, it doesn't mean that they can't still cause harm. And so, you know, therapists are humans, and they, even if they're Indian, doesn't mean that they're a good therapist. So just keep that in mind as well while you're looking for someone. For example, I remember seeing an Indian therapist. I had like one session with her, and she was just so, like, rude in a way. Like, she kind of reminded me of like my parents, like just very critical. And, you know, I realized that she was just kind of continuing the toxic cycles that, you know, I feel like a lot of South Asian families kind of do. And so just because they share your identity doesn't mean that they've healed that part and that they've worked on that part. So just keep that in mind. And then if a therapist is not a good fit, try not to ghost. Try not to just, you know, ignore them. Practice healthy communication. Practice direct communication. You can literally say, I type down what I usually say. I say, I don't think that we're a good fit right now, but thank you for meeting with me. And, you know, the work you do is important, so thank you. And that's pretty much it. And they understand, you know, like, they're therapists. They have their own process of like, okay, it's not a good fit. But try not to ghost. And so, you know, just be honest and direct, and it's a great way to practice healthy communication. So I have spicy Korean, and I'm going to use the blue cheese. Give that like a 7. The last flavor I have is Louisiana rub. I'm gonna dip it in ranch. I think it's a 6. It's not doing anything for me. So my favorites are still original hot, mango habanero. The atomic, I like that little punch that it gives me, so I might get that again. But other than that, all the other flavors were okay. What are your favorite flavors, y'all? Why don't I like lemon pepper and garlic parmesan? Because that one they seem to be so popular. But basically, I want to end this by saying that therapy is hard work. It's challenging. It's, you know, it's not fun. It's sometimes you don't want to go, and usually it's the days when you don't want to go that you really should go. And sometimes in the beginning it's really hard. You know, it's hard to it brings up things that maybe you don't want to think about, or maybe you never thought about. And so I just want to say that once you find a therapist that you like, that you feel like you can trust, the next process is, going to your sessions, being committed to your work, and being committed to your healing, and going even when it's hard, and checking in with your therapist. All of that is part of the healing. So best of luck with finding a therapist. I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, or if I missed anything, please comment, and I will respond to it. This is just the first part of therapy, is finding a good therapist. So I hope it helps, and good luck. Bye.